Perspective, though. Been involved with the rail project because of my former life, obviously, since it got voted on in 2005, and all the things that ensued after that, having been in media all the way up until I got elected mayor. But the year prior to getting elected mayor, I announced in February. In March, a month later, we were struck with COVID, and suddenly the issue of how one would campaign, I guess, not having ever gone through a campaign before, became a very different reality. It was really an alternate reality because my life became a never-ending series of Zoom calls. And the fact that people were locked down, if you will, and got wind of the fact that we were available to do Zoom calls, not just me, the other candidates as well, and sometimes all of us were on together. I was averaging about 5 Zoom calls a day, 7 days a week. And the reason why I bring that up is that normally you would think of a campaign where you would have these opportunities to meet with large groups, if you will, and you would cover the issues and maybe the questions of the day, and you'd be done with it. And I don't know how many of those you actually have in the course of the campaign, but this became, in mouthfuls, if you will, hour after hour of meeting different groups. And sometimes the groups would be 5 or 6 people, sometimes it'd be 50 or 60 people. Sometimes they'd be during the day and people were at night, and sometimes they'd be at nighttime and people would toast you with their wine glasses, and you could tell already that you were going to deal with an interesting crowd. But that said, what that brought up was I had a chance to hear in group after group what people were upset about. And I can promise you the rail issue was at the top of every discussion. And what we were going to do about it, and what was the circumstance, and people venting anger and frustration, whatever. So it became very clear to me, that rail, and we knew it anyway, along with the homeless issues and the housing problems, were something we had to address immediately. And it was also very evident by the fact that the FTA had pulled back as our construction partner since 2017, and so things weren't exactly going well. And I talked with the FTA, both the outgoing administrator at the time, Jada Williams, and the incoming Noria Fernandez, and the report cards I got about how they viewed this project made it very challenging, to say the least, because we had lost credibility. And I was being told that no, in certain terms, you got to find a way, Rick, to get your act together. Get the people there in Honolulu working together in a way that's credible, in a way that's cohesive, in a way that we can believe, or we stood the risk of not only losing that $744 million, but other consequences as well. So you add that to the challenge of the community being very upset and very disillusioned, and rightfully so, when you think about all that went on. So that said, it only makes sense that we're not going to call it the rail in the future, And so this is a rebirth, and I know John's going to cover it, and we'll do some other things today. But the naming is, I think, designed to be respectful of something here that is really going to be transformative for future generations to come. This is one of the exciting things you get to work on in a project like this, even though I'm the 4th mayor to touch this project. Is the fact that you know what you're doing really is tied to future generations. So that said, and after a lot of discussion, whatever, it was only fitting because I think really one of the real surprises when people ride the rail, and some of you have already been out there to see it, I know, and been on it, is that the view plane is exceptional. I grew up as a kid in the Boston area riding in subways at an early age. And those are very dark places where the only thing of interest is the people who get on the subway with you, but really there's not much to look at. And every now and then they might be outside, but that's not really wasn't the case. In this particular case, I think the viewplane is going to surprise everyone and how it adds to the enhancement of the ride. So in that context, I'm looking at a name in all the research we did in the background and discussions that took place, and I'll let John and Roger talk about that. The name Skyline seemed most appropriate. I think it's I know it's probably the best kept what was the joke you have there? The best kept secret about ever. You know, I wasn't about to come up here and throw you a curve and say something else and say we were only fooling with that other name. For those of you who knew that, even though I contemplated that, I see you laughing at me, and I thought about doing that. I really did. But no, it's significant, and so hopefully it also will take away this connotation, the negative connotation. I think you're going to begin to experience that when once people start riding, when we get out there in our first week of July and the end of June, and getting a different kind of a buzz, and that's what we're hoping for. We want it to be a very positive, powerful, optimistic experience for our community on the days going forward. But I think the renaming of it and not alluding to it as the rail anymore, and it'll take a while. Renaming takes a while. Like, we know that, education of the public or whatever. But we all think the Skyline is respectful. It speaks to the experience. I think it'll be easy for people to allude to it, and so that's where we are. So I got nothing else to say, I guess, other than I'm going to bring up John Noguchi, but I had the honor of being able to say that. I would tell you, I just announced it over at Mission Memorial since I told them I had to come here for this, because it's the commendation ceremony for acts of bravery with the fire department and citizens. So it's a very noble event. And people all smiled and liked it. So that said, I'm going to bring up John Noguchi, our Deputy Director for Transportation. I should, one of the editorial, while I have the two of these men here, and Patrick's here too. I don't want to embarrass him, but I would tell you I have enormous confidence in not only their talents, but really their passion for this project as well, and the caring and the incredible amount of details. And we all know of something of this magnitude, not everything is going to be exactly planned out. Patrick's in the room day one. There's going to be its own experience, but I think going into it right now, we have the kind of leadership, the kind of knowledge, and the kind of commitment that you want for an undertaking of this. So with that, I'll ask John Noguchi to come up.
Let me turn our focus to the video screen right now. We have a short introduction video on Skyline.
Oahu, a closely knit island with big city presence and small town feel. We are a connected, world-class city, firmly centered in the middle of the vast Pacific Ocean. Mobility on our small island is challenging. Lacking the freedom to move compromises our quality of life. Throughout our history, our transportation networks have evolved to move people through locomotive railroads, streetcars, electric trolley buses, diesel and hybrid buses, and now 100% electric buses. How we live, work, and play in Oahu is about to evolve once more with the introduction of Skyline, the city and county of Honolulu's fully automated metro rail system. Skyline elevates riders above busy street-level congestion and offers expansive views of Oahu's south shore between Kapolei and Honolulu. Passengers will move between Skyline stations with confident certainty and are directly connected to major destinations and neighborhoods via walking, biking, driving, and a bus and handy-van services.
This train has arrived at Honolulu Community College.
We compare Skyline to the resilience of the Manu'oku, a native bird found on Oahu's south shore. The Manu'oku are significant in Native Hawaiian traditions of navigation and wayfinding, and are a symbol of protected voyage and safe return. Manu'oku choose to live with us in our busy urban environment. They are prominent in Oahu's skyline as they soar and dive fluidly in and through our historic city. They are the official bird of the city and county of Honolulu. As the Manu'oku is a symbol of hope and new beginnings, Skyline promises a new era of transportation to soar our riders above Oahu's roadways and gliding them to their most important destinations to live, work, and play.
So first of all, big hats off and congratulations to our information specialist, Travis Soto, who put together that video. Today I really want to talk about it, and I'm going to have a hard time containing my excitement about why are we calling our rail line Skyline. And I'll go back, as Mayor talked about, in our history, our Honolulu Rail project has never had an official name other than what our Federal Transit Administration partners officially recognize as the Honolulu High Capacity Transit Corridor Project. And I think everybody just calls it RAIL, right? With our opening date of June 30th on 2023, however, we are transitioning into a new era. All the construction on the first nearly 11 miles is complete at this time, and it is no longer a project, but it is the first part of a system and a part of our expansive island-wide transportation network. We knew that our rail system needed a name, and over the last 5 years, we've invested time and consideration to bring forth a brand that can carry us into the future on our future-facing system. We looked at other transit networks for comparison and inspiration, and saw names that vary between simple acronyms, mode types, and whimsical icons or animals like Metro, BART, DART, MAX, MTA, MRT, MTR, Link, Lynx as an animal, RTD, and TRAX. So that framed our efforts to start with over 100 potential names. Some were carryovers from our last branding effort that brought forth our holo card. Through discussion, we shortened that long list to a list of less than 10 names. These names were tested in focus groups representing broad demographics of our island population to gauge their response, reaction, and ideas. But it wasn't until we were able to ride our train for the first time with Mayor Blangiardi that Skyline emerged as a leading contender. Our modern rail system is an elevated one. The views are expansive from up above, and our riders will be able to see and discover new parts of their familiar neighborhoods and coastlines they haven't seen before from this new elevation. Skyline. This name just fits and feels right to us. And we can't wait for the public to join us on and after opening day to experience the view from our line in the sky, to ride the sky with us. We will pair the Skyline name with images of the manuoku, the native seabird also known as the white tern. It is the official bird of the city and county of Honolulu and is found only on the island of Oahu on the 8 major Hawaiian islands. They are resilient birds who focus their nesting and raising of their fledgling chicks in our busy urban city center. Previously considered endangered, but with protections placed on them, they have rebounded and repopulated with intention and resilience to grow their footprint from Honolulu to encircle Pu'uloa, or Pearl Harbor. Sound familiar? Like our rail system, right? From a single mating pair of manuoku discovered in Honolulu in 1961 to an estimated population now of over 2,000 birds, this story mirrored our efforts and reminded us of our efforts in Honolulu to design and build more sustainably in our dense urban city and let other communities thrive as country. And the path towards our opening day of rail has been similarly as long. Mary Kavena Pukui is recognized as a preeminent scholar of Hawaiian knowledge. That, if you look at this dictionary from her Hawaiian dictionary, that she included friendly as part of the description of manuoku is significant. That she would ascribe that type of opinion description to a dictionary definition of that friendly characteristic of a bird, that's meaningful. And it underscores the manuoku's ability and desire to live amongst us in our urban environment. Aloha aku mākou I ka manuoku, au o ka manaolana, aloha like paha ka manuoku ya mākou. We love the manuoku, and hopefully it too loves us. But we learned about the significance of the manuoku in Native Hawaiian voyaging, that encountering this friendly bird meant land was nearby. It was a predictor of a successfully completed voyage, a safe return, or the discovery of new places. With our rail system, we hope to navigate our riders to the places they know and love, and perhaps discover new places they don't know of yet. So everything, we wanted to be sensitive about the names and the images and the branding that we chose. So in selecting the manuoku, before we move forward, we reached out to Native Hawaiian leaders and groups to discuss and consult on the cultural branding of rail, partnered with the images of manuoku. And to our surprise, and maybe to our delight, we received a lot of confirming and sometimes illuminating feedback, which gave us that confidence to proceed. we look at this mele composed by Kainani Kahuna Ele and Hale Aloha Ayau, called He Mele no Papahano Moku Akea. And these lines refer directly to the Manooku. Manooku ika ahui. Hialaka inaka ahui. So that's translated to Manooku that are clustered together. They are leaders for the people. So this lined up with two very strong sentiments that really, we had some very strong feelings from Native Hawaiian leaders who likened our use of the Manooku very differently. I mean, even in comparison with how one saw it compared to the other. One was a leader in Polynesian navigation, and he compared all of us who will ride Skyline to be the Manooku, that we are all traveling together in that ahui. We're all traveling together towards the places we go and the places that we call home. So this relates to that sentiment of the first line, Manooku ika ahui. In parallel with the second line, Kumulelo Hawaii, a Hawaiian language teacher, characterized Skyline itself, the trains, the rail, as the Manooku. Simply and elegantly, he said, see the bird? Follow it home. So with that mana'o, Skyline can be a beacon and a promise of travel, discovery, and safe return. Helaka inaka lahui. So we look forward to welcoming everyone aboard Skyline on June 30th to ride the sky with the Manooku. There we go. And just for some notes, the video will be made available after this event. And we also have we have a style guide for usage for Skyline and the other elements of our multimodal transportation network. And a little bit of teaser, you can see the 3 commemorative photo cards that we've designed and will be distributing to commemorate the opening of Skyline on June 30th. So prominently featuring some of the Manooku. And at this time, I guess we can take any questions.
Was there ever any, I guess, thoughts to consider giving it a Hawaiian name at some point? Or?
Absolutely. We can actually go into that a little bit, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I think what Mayor said at the beginning of this discussion was very important. This discussion on branding spanned 2 mayoral administrations. And to be completely frank, I think it was hard to have a public process and try to get a positive image for rail at a time when people's confidence in heart and the quality and the abilities and the concept of rail was in such a deep, dark place. So when we went out and did some public process and did some surveying, what was interesting was, usually when we have a branding consultant and we go out for this kind of stuff, you want to find out what should we call this? In this case, our first effort, we ended up with what shouldn't, actually it wasn't even what shouldn't we call this. It was like, you know what you guys shouldn't call this? That was more the tone of it. So, but you can imagine, it was pandemic. We were in a dark place. We sometimes forget where we were 3 years ago. So people had a lot to say. Like, we knew that we had to put the train forward because we have the bus, we have the handy van, and so it was only natural that even though we didn't necessarily want to call it the train, we had to test it out there and see what people felt about it. And the resounding sentiment there was, if you're going to spend billions of dollars, you cannot call it the train. Do better. And I think people said that the term train sounded old and dated, like a historic railroad, like the type of railroad we used to have that operates out in Eva now that it's historic. So we also just tested, what happens if we just keep calling it the mode rail? Or the rail, I guess, we could have also tested. People had very strong feelings about that. And I think it might be due to just how rail was treated in public knowledge and in the media, where rail is always ascribed to a certain level of negativity. So we were advised that if we called it rail, it would always carry that baggage with it. So we also asked about what if the system was just called HART after the agency that built it. And I think at that time, confidence was very low in HART. And there was a very strong statement expressed from an auntie that said, let the name die with the agency when you guys tear it down. And so that's the kind of place that we were at. So we tried to change the narrative a little bit and talk about some of the potential Hawaiian names. And just for a little bit of perspective, I used to be a Hart employee, so not that I took any of that very personally, but I also was in charge of a lot of the cultural programs at Hart. And so I had a pretty strong connection to I felt like I had a lot of personal investment into the programs there. And so when we looked at naming, we looked at Hawaiian names, of course. And even our system of naming the stations, we had a Hawaiian station naming working group that we brought together, people of knowledge from all over the island, and sat down and we made a commitment that the Hawaiian station name would always be fronted in front of a place name. Hence, we have the Kualaka'i Iskapolei station and so on and so forth, the Halawa Aloha Stadium station. So that kind of cultural commitment was very strong with rail from the start. And so when we looked at names, these were some of the ones we looked at. We looked at Hoku, but we felt when we looked at that, Hoku looked and it sounded more of a nod towards Polynesian voyaging in canoes. We're not necessarily navigating by the stars here. We're terrestrial. We're land-based. We had Ilima. We were very excited about Ilima. Even some of these designs, we moved them forward and did some designs to show how they might be re-represented on our rail vehicles. And with a cool one where the Ilima was stuck right on the side of the train, in the front and the back of the train, it looked like it had an Ilima in its ear. And we realized after doing some testing, we wanted something that would not be mispronounced and we wouldn't have to constantly correct. And we found that enough people pronounced it Ilima because they didn't know. And to get very technical and geeky, because that's the place where I come from, we would have to have always used a serif font, otherwise you can't tell if it's an I and an L or a double L. So, a double L in Spanish, like tortilla or other things. So we kind of veered a little bit away from Ilima. And also the fact is, it didn't really work when we thought about, you don't ride the Ilima. And so we veered away from that a little bit. We really liked Kui. Everybody has an Uncle Kui. Everybody knows a Kui who plays music. Everybody knows a friendly guy named Kui. And we really liked that concept of almost being able to take the Ilima, right? But Kui means to string, as in flowers on a lake. And we thought that our rail line was stringing all the stations and the communities together, just like a lei encircling Pu'uloa or Pearl Harbor. And we had to look at the meanings beyond that. And Kui has some close pronunciation and alternate meanings that talk about, striking something, like a car hitting something, or to smite someone. And we said, that's not quite the meanings we would want to ascribe to our rail system. We looked at Moku. Moku was one of the candidates. Holo card could have been the Moku card to recognize this island that we live on. We are the city and county of Honolulu, but we are the island of Oahu. And so we wanted to actually shout out to this rail line. It's connecting all the big land divisions. It's connecting the Ewa Moku and the Kona Moku on this island of Oahu. And we also had Ola. Ola we liked because it represented a new lifestyle or a new way of living, such as like these transit-oriented development neighborhoods that we wanted to, like I said, we're keeping the town so we can keep the country. And I just noticed there are a whole bunch of manaoku flying around right outside the window just now. So we'll take that as a good sign. Are there any other questions?
2 weeks out, it's the big day here. Where do things stand in regard with testing and just from a technical standpoint, how are things looking at the system?
If it's okay, can I call up Patrick Presser to talk on that? Sure. I will say though, at this point, we are comfortably confident.
Sure.
Aloha, my name is Patrick Preusser. I'm the Director of Rapid Transit for DTS. Do you mind repeating your question? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, just with the big day 2 weeks out now, can you just give us an update on where things stand with testing and how's everything looking from a technical standpoint?
Yeah, well, I can tell you the workforce, all of our employees, all of our contracted employees are very excited. You mentioned testing, but testing is behind us. We've completed an extensive trial operations phase. We completed a system demonstration phase, and now we're ready to open for business. So We are actually running the same level of service that we will every day in passenger service. The system is performing high, relatively 99.5% system service availability. So we're ready to go.
What's the, I guess, the confidence level that, you know, that there's going to be enough people writing this to actually make it work well?
Roger? Sure.
Well, you didn't listen to my Rick Amata morning show because we went through a lot of that on that show. We expect, I expect that by the end of the year that we'll be looking at 8,000 to 10,000 riders on our system. And I'm confident of that because I know what the ridership is on the parallel bus routes that go in the corridor. Now, frankly, you know, that's not a great number. And it's primarily because this is a first of 3 segments. So in our second segment, which will be 2 years from now, when we get to the airport and onto Middle Street, our projections will go up to probably in the 25,000 range. And then by the time we get to Civic Center, downtown and Civic Center, our projections are in the 85,000 range. When we get to Ala Moana, our projections are in the 116,000 range. Now, people talk about, you know, what will this do for traffic, you know, when we open the first segment. And I'll be frank, it's not going to do a lot for traffic in the first segment because we're building this really for the future. We have thousands of permitted housing units that are permitted in the west, but are not yet built. These are in the order of 25,000, 30,000 additional units, 12,000 Ho'opili, 3,000 Coal Ridge. So I think that, you know, when we talk about rail, you also have to put yourself into this transformational mindset of we're building rail for people right now, and people will love it when they start riding it right now, but we're really building it for the future. You know, we have issues of increased growth, and our city plan is basically, we've designated the corridor that rail is on. We call it the primary urban center corridor, and that's where we are projecting growth. That's what the general plan says. So there's that. And then there's the issue of when we talk 20, 25 years into the future, it's a whole different mindset, right? We have issues of climate change. We have issues of greenhouse gas. We have issues of regulation. California has changed the regulation to basically, within that time frame, to largely replace internal combustion engines. So we see our mode share rising, you know, in a long-term fashion from where it is today to what it will be. And that's really what I would say for rail is in the short term. This is the first segment. It would have been great if we had started at UH and gone backwards. We couldn't do that because we need a 43-acre site to anchor rail, and that's out there where we are. So it is what it is. We are now into the most difficult part. But I think in terms of the construction part, the second segment is moving along smartly, and we don't expect any issues. The third segment, you know, we're all dealing with Dillingham Boulevard, and that is the critical path for us. I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, and just to clarify the numbers you mentioned, you say starting off with 8,000 to 10,000. Is that per
day? And that would be, you know, I don't like to make these you know, on the first week we're going to have that. I always preface it by saying after the first year, that's my expectation.
What are the revenues looking like for ridership, based on ridership?
Well, our revenues, particularly in U.S. public transportation, as everybody knows, that the mass transit is not a profit-making business. If it was, it would be run by United Airlines or somebody else that would make a profit on it. When transit started failing in the 50s and 60s, and when the government started taking over transit, you know, we didn't. So what do we expect? Historically, we have expected 25 to 30% of the expenses to be made up by fares. Now, we're not making that right now as we still recover our ridership from COVID. But my expectation is that we will be able to do more than that by the time rail gets into town. So right now, our transit, our rail system contractor is a $54 million per year expense. When I add up electricity and the rest of the DTS rail division, we're about 75 million. And I'll make that, I'll let you let that sink in a little bit, but also to mix it with what we spend on our other modes. On our handy van, our annual expenses are 66 million. And on our bus system, our annual expenses are 266 million. So transit in this town is a $400+ million expense. By the time we get to our system into town, all of our projections show that the cost per passenger for rail will be the cheapest of all the modes that we operate.
And what is that dollar amount?
Right now, the dollar amount for a passenger carried is in the $2.50 to $3 range per passenger. Now, we give a lot of service, you know, we price it a lot for our elders, for our disabled, and our fares are relatively cheap. So our average fare is about $1.
So what is the projected amount for 1 year for rail?
For 1 year is the dollars I mentioned. 54 million for the contract, 75 million overall.
But for ridership, what is the?
I have never even done the calculations.
Yeah, but I want to throw in an adage on this, because transportation in every major urban center is subsidized. It's not a profit center. That's not unique to Hawaii. Okay, and so this is really a value proposition. And one of the greatest sayings I ever learned is this from Oliver Wendell Holmes. It was the definition of a cynic. And by no way, Ian, do I imply that you're being a cynic. But it is about someone who knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing.
Somebody should say, how much do you expect to make?
I agree.
Nobody has yet.
Well, I don't think we're looking to make a profit. I think we're looking to do
Just the dollar number
Oh, the dollar number that we're, well, I think
that you expect from a year's worth of ridership. Nobody has said that yet.
Well,
Let me try that.
Yeah, it's an estimate.
Let me try that there too.
Yeah, I could almost do the math in my own head. If we want to go to 10,000 riders a day at $3 each times 365 days, I just can't do that math in my head right now. But you could guess that. Scott, you
But
got a
can somebody say
calculator there?
that on the record?
You know, I mean, I think.
I've asked the question before, but nobody's answered.
Okay, well, just on a rough estimate.
Can we just get back to that?
Okay.
Because I think it's complicated because we share that fare with the bus.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, we're building, we've got all the expenses in the system that we're running right now. We're gonna do, we're gonna end up at about $8 per passenger. And again, that's because we have an initial segment that we're projecting very limited ridership on. I think the real question is, what would it look like when we get into town and we make this system to be really a useful system, and then we're back to the $2+ range per passenger. So
When it's fully built up, do you know how much it will, when it's going to Civic Center, the amount that the city is expected to get from ridership?
That we're expecting about 85,000 riders per day. Your question is dependent upon also the level of fares that we charge. I do expect our fares will go up moderately with inflation as time goes on, but I don't have an exact number.
Okay, first of all, there's no crystal ball on this from the standpoint of what the actual ridership would be. As Roger just said, we get to 10,000 people and what that experience would be a day, and then we get to, 2 years from now, we're going to pass through two of the top employment centers in Pearl Harbor and the airport. Get the Civic Center, we'll have completed an 18.75 mile route, but it'll be through the 3 employment centers. It's hard to say on a projection how people are going to really value what this represents until it starts to happen. I kind of think we're lowballing it on the projections. I think the efficiency of this, personally, I'm much more optimistic, but I want to yield to my experts in here. But I think just even for openness, the ease of getting from East Kapolei to Aloha Stadium in 21 minutes versus what you face in a car. Then add to that the fact that the trains will be available every 10 minutes, and there are going to be buses readily available to take them on express routes to where they want to go, is going to be a welcome relief for many. So I tend to be optimistic, but having dealt with similar situations in inventory and pricing or whatever, we really have to see how this unfolds. What we do know is we're offering something of quality, something that's unprecedented, and something that is, especially from the west side, a really difficult situation was how they get back and forth to the east side. And so once this becomes a reality, I actually think a lot of people are going to be surprised by it, considerably. So to me, these are low estimates. And the other thing I think it's important is because we're keeping the fare similar with the bus, and how people can get on buses and off buses and ride the rail, that's going to be a blended fare. So if I get off of a bus and get on the rail with my Holo card, I paid $3. I mean, you know, it gets a little bit more convoluted that way in. I think we have to look in the aggregate once we get there. So I hate to sound cliche, but time will tell. But at the end of the day, this project is not insignificant. And I think that it's going to be extremely well received when people actually start to have the experience. So it's not like we're trying to duck the numbers. Everything is full disclosure. But keep in mind, even though Roger alluded to United Airlines, the federal government subsidizes the airline business in this country and the automotive business in this country. And for all the profits that these different people make in their own things, it's still not done without government subsidy. So that's part of living in a major metropolitan area. Honolulu continues to expand, if you will, its population on the west side, and this is something that's really needed given the limitations of our roads. So I think the numbers are going to be much more robust than people think, both in ridership and in revenues. And I'll go on record as saying that, but I want to defer right now to my experts so I can have the pleasure of telling them later, you were wrong. But it's much better than you think. All right? Okay? All right? Anybody else? Anybody? Anything? Look, I really thank you guys for being here. I think this is a tremendous story, and we're really proud of it. A lot of people didn't think we would be here today. Maybe I should have said that in the beginning. But I would tell you, as it turns out, June 30th is just shy by a day or two of 2.5 years exactly on the job. And knowing what we inherited at that time and where we were, and to be running our first segment in just 2.5 years, coming through COVID, as John mentioned, people sometimes forget what we were, just how much fear and uncertainty and we were in the midst of that lockdown. To overcome all of that, to get the FTA back to the table as a construction partner, to be credible, to be operating, as Patrick said, at 99.5% efficiency, where all the other things we had to overcome. I could not be more proud or grateful. And by the way, when I talked about getting our act together, Patrick played a big role of being at the table with us and helping us develop this plan. So this is important and it's significant and it's historic for this island, and I'm very proud to be mayor at this time. So I thank you all for being here.